All right, and it's time for us to get into the newsroom, and this is where we look at some of the stories that have been making headlines right here in the country, also internationally, and how they have been covered, and possible ways that we may be facing challenges as journalists and members of the Fourth Estate. So I'll start by, first of all, introducing the panel that we have this morning. To my extreme left, we have Patrick Gadara, who's a cartoonist, but also a communications expert or consultant. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think he's also a media critic.
I wear many hats.
You wear many hats. But anyway, karibu sana and good to have you. We also have Crispus Yankem, who's also a governance consultant and also a communications expert. Good morning.
Thank you, Michael.
Good to have you. Shortly, we're going to be joined by David Ohito, who is a digital editor, and also Susan Auma, who's also a governance consultant. But first of all, as we begin, let's first of all take a look at what happened, gentlemen. And this is Jamhuri Day, which took place 2 days ago. This was on Monday. And of course, we'll be looking at the president's speech and maybe some of the things that we should read into that speech. But let's first of all start by just listening to some of the things that he had to say.
Nations openly recognizing that the ICC is not impartial. Some have withdrawn, others have considered that step. Twice, our parliament has passed a motion to withdraw. We have sought the changes that will align the ICC to respect national sovereignty. Those changes have not been forthcoming. We will therefore need to give serious thought to our membership. Hatutaki tuingiliwe na nchi zingine wakituambia wanatusomesha sijui civic education ati njisi ya kupiga. Wakenya wanajua kupiga kura. Mkitaka kutusaidia, help the organizations, IEBC and other institutions, help them. Sio hii magrupu ingine inazunguka huko na mambo ya ukora. I stress their achievements because this was Kenya's first age of heroes. And we who come after them should always remember what a precious gift they left behind. How then dare we soil their achievement by tearing apart what they so painfully united? The founding generation would disown whoever makes a Kenyan feel unworthy because of his ethnicity or faith. The founding generation would remind us that whoever steals from the common purse is not just a thief, but an enemy of our unity. And truly, anyone who lets political competition tip into hatred of another Kenyan is utterly unworthy of their sacrifice. The founders of this nation taught us that a Kenyan is anyone devoted to this country. Let us never forget this lesson. Our fathers were one. We too are one. We are one family. And we know that no family ever sees things exactly the same way. But even when we disagree at home, we do not burn down the house. Fellow Kenyans, that is the story of next year. We will disagree robustly because we are a democracy. But that disagreement will have limits. We will not fight.
All right, so that's just bits and pieces of the presidential speech during the Jamhuri Day on the 12th. That was on Monday. And let me now come to the panel, starting with you, Gadara, possibly on your take on the speech and maybe what we should read out of that as the media. I know there was predictions previous or before the speech came, and one of the things that we're comparing is last year's speech, where he talked a lot about corruption and the fact that he was going to make sure that it's dealt with. Of course, a year on,
it was entirely missing.
There was nothing to do with corruption on the speech. But let me just hear from you in terms of your take from that speech and what we should be reading out of it.
Well, overall, I thought the speech was quite disappointing, to be quite honest. I don't think it dealt with the challenges that we actually were facing, especially in the run-up to next year's election. I think he really tended to skirt around it, mostly sort of trying to politicize it in a sense. When he speaks against the ICC, when he speaks against civil society. But I think I would have wanted to see a much more detailed exposition of how is the country going to be going forward. So we've got problems setting up the IEBC now. We've delayed the appointment of chairman. Apparently there is the interviews for the members going on, but even how those who are shortlisted is a bit problematic. I mean, I'd have wanted him to expand. There's been lots of talk actually also about postponing the elections so that we'll be ready for them. And I think as head of state, it would have been good for him to go into explaining what his government position would be with regard to this, with regard to ensuring that we actually do have an election that is credible and going forward. Not just saying that we will abide by the rules, but how exactly are we going to go forward and get that done. I think the second thing is there were some statistics that he put out that I think it would be good for the media to fact check. He spoke about our education system being the best in Africa and 30th in the world. I have not seen nobody
any
else.
statistics that prove that.
Yeah, I mean, where did he get this? In fact, the Wezo report that came out, I think, was it in April or August, I'm not sure, showed that while we were best in East Africa, our education system was still really, really bad, where you had 10 to 16-year-olds who couldn't do class 2 mathematics and literacy. So that's not good. You know, so when he speaks about these things, it's good, I think, for the media to go back into the speech, pull them out, say, well, this is what he said, but what is the actual truth and how true are they? The final thing, I think, is I think he was very disingenuous when he spoke about the ICC. He spoke about our local laws being respected, yet our local laws, our own constitution, includes a clause, 143.4, that is the president can be prosecuted. And his government has been at the forefront of subverting that very clause, so he needs to be called out on that. And when he went after civil society to speak about, against rather civic education, when his own party has been participating in foreign-funded, quote-unquote, training, if you will, like for women parliamentarians, etc., that's not channeled through the IEBC, then again he seems to be speaking on both sides of his mouth, as in saying one thing while doing another.
Okay.
So
I think we'll analyze some of those things as we go along and maybe what we need to follow up.
Right.
But at this point, let me bring in David Ohito, who's also joined us, and I call it the magic of TV. 1 minute is there, 1 minute is not, but there you go. Welcome, David. Do you agree? Were you disappointed, like Adhara, with President's speech? Is it what maybe media had predicted should be expected from the President? And of course, the fact that corruption in this particular speech was completely missing.
Well, 53 years of independence. We have nothing to celebrate. He talked about the founding fathers. The founding fathers envisioned a country that there is no ignorance, there's no poverty, that there is no disease ravaging us. We've just added more problems to what there were in 1953. So there's not even any little iota of sense to try to make reference to what the forefathers or the founding fathers and mothers of this nation wanted. Yes, disappointed because as we celebrated 53 years of independence, a group of Kenyans were protesting to take back the country to where it should be because of massive corruption that has been witnessed at the national level and much more even at the county level. And I blame ourselves, the media, for failing to focus on the counties that have been, experimenting corruption at an alarming speed. He tried to bring back the ICC debate. Perhaps the glue that put them together in 2013 is getting weaker and weaker, and perhaps he needed to start that line. It really did not make a lot of sense, does not resonate with the Kenya, the status that is today. But I am very happy the president said, should he lose elections, he will accept defeat.
And we can hold him to account to that. All right. Sure. I'll also welcome Susan Auma, who's joining us also on set. Karibu sana. Crispus, your take on the speech and possibly what we should glean out of it, and concentrating more in terms of media, what we should follow up based on his speech. Because, you know, Gadara accuses us of he said, she said, and we leave it at that. But what should we pick from that speech and follow up?
I think, first of all, let me say that it is a case of looking at a glass as half empty or half full. Being a politician, I think it was only well in order for the president to grab that momentum or that particular opportunity to extol the achievements of his government over the last 4 years. We remember very well he spoke about one important constituency, which is actually the youth, and the things that his government has been able to achieve over the last 4 years. Of course, he spoke about agriculture, he spoke about other development matters. But again, whereas I listen to Gadara, I tend to agree with some of the things that he said, but I disagree with him when he talked about IEBC. I don't know what the president, I don't know what the president has to do with IEBC. We know that IEBC is actually an independent institution. There wasn't any reason or any need for the president actually to pronounce himself on what is going on around the selection panel and the recruitment of the new commissioners. Having said that, I think what I don't agree as far as that statement is concerned is actually the discussion around ICC and, of course, funding of national or non-governmental organizations in the country. We know very well the role that non-governmental organizations in the country have played over the many years that they have been in existence. When you talk about governance and governance issues, when you talk about putting the government on check, I think they have actually played a critical role. Coming back to the media, I think it was the usual coverage that we've been able to see over the last years, whatever these kind of occasions are being celebrated, the comparison of what to expect and what not to expect, then eventually what was missing out. But overall, I think the media did a good job. I would agree, but of course they need actually to go further and integrate some of the things that were raised. It was again disappointing to see that the political class, particularly in the counties, actually took advantage of the day. Instead of celebrating the achievements, they decided to campaign, to put the country in a campaign mode. Look at what was happening in Meru, the Kiraitus versus Munyas. Look at what was happening in Mombasa. Maybe that's just an indication
that there's nothing to celebrate and just gives us the temperature of what is
Remember, I started by saying that it is a case of looking at a glass as half empty or half full.
Okay.
It depends with where you sit from.
All right.
Yeah.
Suzanne, your take on the president's speech on Jamhuri Day and generally the coverage that we have had.
I think, first of all, I must say, I must agree with Gadara that it was disappointing. What are we taking home? We are taking home negative from the speech. I thought this was an opportunity, and given that this was going to be the last Jamhuri Day just before the election, for him to tell us what his government has achieved in terms of what is Uhuru and what is not Uhuru. And you could see at the end of it, in the social media, people are saying, it's not a Uhuru, you know, what are we celebrating? And if he chose to go full-blown on campaign politics, then I agree with Gadara again that he should also have spoken about the institution, giving people the hope that it's not just election being fair, but my government is doing everything it can to make sure that institution and all processes are in place. And to what are we taking home? We are taking home an attack on the civil society. We are taking home, you see, when he attacks civic education, it's like he is not aware that most Kenyans do not even understand their civic roles, their civic responsibilities. Right now we have a new constitution that even leaders do not understand. Even the Kenyans themselves don't even understand what it means. So we expect Kenyans to make right choices, but they don't understand. When you attack foreign governments, how come we never attack them when they are funding us on development projects? How come we want to attack them when they are questioning or when they are trying to enlighten the masses to kind of play their role, which is so much envisioned in the Constitution of public participation?
Although according to the president and according to what he was saying, it's not so much funding civic education, but the fact that they are funding institutions that would want to sway.
But we must also take into consideration the fact that ever since this government came into power, it has not been a smooth ride for the for non-governmental organization in this country. It started off by wanting to inquire where do you get funding, and most of them have been deregistered, most of these organizations. And maybe that's the reason why majority of Kenyans cannot even understand what is happening and cannot be able to play the effective role of civic education, of checking the government, checking their leaders, because we've not had a good span of civic education in this country. And I thought the president, being the headmaster of this country called Kenya, he would have been, aware of that fact, and anything about good leadership should be his major concern. Good governance should be his major concern. So the question will be, you as your government, what have you ever done with your own government, with the little allocation that even Kenya has? What have you ever done to educate the masses of Kenya on what they need to do? So we are attacking people who come here. They don't come here with a syllabus, but they come here just to give us facilitation so that people can be able to go around and educate Kenyans on their own. So for me, I think that one is kind of sounding an alarm that here I am, elections are coming, and we are not going to entertain anybody who is coming to query us on anything. It's just an alarm. It's a big caution. Yeah.
All right, Ohito, maybe moving this conversation forward, let's look at some of the things he said individually, and of course, winging off from where Susan is coming from, civil society, and the fact that the president made a claim, and I think it's a huge claim, that there are certain organizations that are being funded and not in good light in terms of the election. Is that something maybe we should interrogate? Because we could stand on one side and say that he's making allegations out of the blues. But according to one of the dailies this morning, apparently the government has evidence as to what they're saying.
You know, it reminds me of the Kanu dictatorship script of 1980s and 1990s, that there are foreign masters hanging out there.
Including the internet.
Yes, so when the president said that, and it reminded me that that should not be. If you're the president, you have the evidence, you have all the investigatory machinery and institutions under your purview. Take action. Why go and mourn at a public rally? What then would a woman in Budalangi do if she was confronted by such? I mean, what we need are decisive actions taken on particular issues. And in any case, they've been hanging out with China. Is China not a foreign master? You know, so let's be very fair in the way we deal and even accuse sections of civil society that have done a lot of good work progressing this nation democratically over the last 53 years. For me, that was total balderdash. We need not to get into.
Not to get into Christmas?
If I may, on the whole attack on civil society, I think first we've got to recognize that the government itself is hugely at fault in the poor governance of the sector. There's a law that was passed in 2013 that was assented to by then President Kibaki. It's called the PBO Act, the Public Benefit Organizations Act, that's supposed to govern the NGO sector. This government has refused to operationalize that, for over 3 years. It's refused to operate. That includes, in that law, there are provisions for financial probity, provisions for financial disclosure, all these things that they are asking for, that he's saying we need to know, as Duale was saying yesterday, about 10 billion. It's all in the law. They've refused to operationalize it. This is the government's fault. Secondly, if you look at the board we have today, the NGO board, which, by the way, is supposed to be repealed by the PBO Act, the board itself was dissolved by Jamhuri when he was when the NGOs were still under his ministry, before the president then moved them to interior security. Again, we've got to ask questions. Why is the governance of the NGO sector at interior security function? Why is it we still have a board in place that was supposedly dissolved by a competently sitting CS?
Okay.
And I think in all of this, it shows how the government sort of says one thing, but acts to encourage the exact opposite of it. They come out and blame the NGOs for this. NGOs have been shouting, operationalize the act. And it's the government itself that's refusing and then turns around and blames
the same NGOs,
the NGOs for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think as far as the NGOs are concerned, we all agree that it was actually unfortunate for the president to try and lump all the entire NGO sector into a basket of rotten potatoes. But I think having said that, it is also important for us to realize that the ICC matter is a very important question to address at this particular time. You remember what is going on in Gambia. Yeah, Jammeh has definitely refused to get out of sight. And one wonders what AU is doing about it, and one wonders what other organizations on the African continent that speak actually for the African person are doing about it.
Well, ECOWAS is on the ground with Mkapa, leading talks so far.
But actually, for me, the most sensible thing for them to do is to ensure that this man is toppled. I think that is the way to go. It is time to call a spade a spade. But we must appreciate that ICC is a very important institution. This is why I say that I do not agree with the president when he talks about withdrawing or any intention of the country withdrawing. But moving forward, I think they were positive from his statements that we need to talk about. For instance, when he spoke about ensuring that the next year's election is free, fair, and free of violence, I think that is something that we must support. Remember, we are approaching this election with telltale signs of all the violence animosities going on in the counties. You need to look at, like I said earlier before, what was happening in Meru, what was happening in Mombasa, what was happening even in some sections of Kisii. I think those are signs that the country is not sitting pretty. The IEBC work is well cut out. The police work is well cut out. And it is only important for the president to pronounce himself on such critical matters. Even the opposition, I think it is upon them also to denounce some of this violence. I think moving forward, like I said before, as a country, we must be able to look at everything with a tooth comb, address all the matters that are around elections, and ensure that we're fixing our systems for us to be able to have a credible election.
Didn't you start by saying that the president should not pronounce himself on this election?
I said I don't know why you're faulting the president for him not actually pronouncing himself on IEBC.
Actually, no.
I said there is a process that is ongoing right now. Let us leave it to the selection panel.
I'm sorry, Yankem. When I started off, I said that we have an election coming and he needs to pronounce himself on that election. And I gave examples of things that are becoming contentious within this election. I'm not saying that he decides who becomes IEBC commissioner, but surely he has to recognize that if there is a delay, it has knock-on effects. And the election is not just about the commissioners. As you've spoken, security is an issue. That's within his purview.
Security when is not within his purview.
It is actually.
It is not.
And
the police is an independent institution.
No, actually, if you read the Constitution, it says when it comes to policy, this is within the purview of the CS and of his boss, of course, the president. So we need to know what preparations is he making to ensure that if we are in a situation we are saying, well, it actually looks like there might be some violence, what are they doing to prepare for that? We don't want to be in the situation where we are in post 2008 where we learned
reacting to what has already happened.
This would have happened and did nothing.
Okay, let me hear from Susan.
Michael, I don't agree with Crispus. You can't say
exactly?
that on the basis that we need to applaud the fact that the president has spoken about free and fair. You cannot, on one side you pronounce about free and fair election, on the other side you're talking about withdrawing from ICC. On one side, you want to promote peaceful elections.
But wouldn't
because and on the other hand, you're attacking the civil society, just like Ohito said. I think the president presented himself. Once again, he disappointed Kenyans. You remember? He disappointed Kenyans during the corruption summit, where he said, what do you want me to do? Again, this time round, he has disappointed Kenyans. He has the tools of power, like David Ohito was saying. And if he knows these organizations, which are being funded for ill motives, one will expect him to have acted. And actually, what he'll be telling Kenyans, to Korada, the way he likes saying, and we know anybody will try to do ABCD, we are doing that. But you don't present yourself as you are helpless. You see? So I don't agree, and I look at his speech as trying to give with one hand and also taking away with
the other hand.
With the other hand. So it wasn't.
Okay. Let's move on to something else which has been happening in Kenya and also was missing in his speech, although there are some who would say it would have been a repetition if he said anything. And maybe just to give a quick refresher, if we have the app sounds, this is to do with the nurses' strike and the doctors' strike that has been going on now for a while. And of course, it was missing in the speech. But then again, would it have been a repetition if he said anything, because he had already made statements towards that? Let's just hear what has been going on in the doctors' strike.
We cannot take a decision in Nairobi and then the National Governing Council comes and disown that decision. The National Governing Council represents the exact position of members on the ground. I want to say categorically that Mr. Maurice Opetu, John B. and Ali Soreng have no any legal nexus or mandate to sign any document. In fact, the return to work formula is only going to be signed by an authorized representative of the union, and that is the General Secretary.
So that is Seth Panyako, who is the SecGen for the Nurses Union, basically making it very clear. And David Ohito, maybe in terms of breaking down this strike, let's start with the nurses and the fact that there seemed to have been a deal, then again there is no deal.
Characteristic of governments trying to divide unions all over the time. Same old script again, instead of finding lasting solutions that would really resolve the health crisis in this country. If you ask me, I think negotiations have been far too long, and Kenyans needed to see an end to this. People are really, really suffering across the country. I mean, it's becoming unbearable. And what you see in the state of our public hospitals is only what you'd see in a failed state, not in a state where there are people who are charged with leadership positions.
Okay. Were you disappointed or surprised that it was missing in the presidential speech on Jamhuri Day?
Maybe he did not want to interfere with the ongoing negotiations. He has left it to independent able officers.
And the court case.
And the court case also, he didn't want to prejudice that. I wouldn't fault the president on that.
Okay.
But we believe the people seconded from the Ministry of Health, from the county governments led by Governor Ongwae, are capable of resolving the issues. The problem is that it has been a protracted, a negotiation that is not giving results as fast as Kenyans would have expected.
Crispus.
Michael, I think there are three sectors that we cannot afford to abdicate our responsibility. One of them is the health sector, the other one is the education sector, and the third one is the agricultural sector. I think these are critical sectors that we must be able to address any emerging issues in a very quick and expedite manner. It is very unfortunate that it is now going to 2 weeks ever since the nurses went on strike. We've seen the suffering, the untold suffering across the country, from Mombasa to all the way to Turkana, from Baringo to Nairobi. This is very unfortunate, and I think as a government, it is an opportunity for us to be able to prick our conscience and ensure that we are fixing the mess that has become the health sector. The question of corruption, Michael, is big. And what is happening right now in the health ministry is something that we must be able to question, because when you look at it, how is it that somebody who was valued at 15 million shillings upon appointment 3 years ago, right now is putting up a house, your very own story, by the Standard on Sunday, is putting up a house worth 120 million shillings. We must be able to ask ourselves, what is the kind of business that this person is doing for him to be able to raise 120 million shillings? That is only what we know. We don't know what other things that we don't know.
Tender.
But going forward, I think even the media must be able to play their role responsibly. Looking at the strike by the nurses, I think you get a feeling that even the media has been able to go against the ethics of journalism, because when you project the images of people suffering across the nation, then you bring us mean-looking officials of the nurses union talking tough It only
So what are we
helps
supposed to do, make them smile?
To make a bad situation even worse. I think going forward, it is upon the media to be able even to put some of these things out of the public glare. For instance, when Sep Panyako says that things are going to get worse, what message are you sending to somebody who's suffering in hospital?
I really don't understand what CRISPR's idea of the media's role is. I think the media is fine. It reports about the statements by NAS's officials, by the officials of their unions. I mean, that is fine. My criticism would be about whether it actually contextualizes the entire process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as Ohito has said, it's been dragging on for a long time. And lots of this time, it actually has not been visible. You know, it's only when they went on strike that suddenly the media rushes to it. The second thing is, I think we need to start understanding that the government has certain ways that it seems to have of dealing with strikes. So the first time it's gone into an agreement with the union that it turns out it was only a section of that union, where it tries to split these unions. We saw it in the teachers' strike as well. You know, so we've got to ask this about government. How does it approach this? All these moves initially to condemn strikes, to get them declared illegal, you know, etc. Are all part of sort of, how do I put it, a template, if you will, that the government utilizes. And we've got to ask, does this template actually help? Or does it hurt? Does it help to resolve strikes quickly, or does it tend to prolong them by polarizing our opinions? You know, these are questions I think, for me, will be important for us to investigate, you know, going forward, so that when this happens, you know, next time, because this won't be the last time we're going to have doctors going by history, doctors or nurses or teachers going on strike. We can look at how our government then reacts and responds. The third thing is the fact that the strike itself happened is a failure of governance. You know, as I said last week, they knew that there was a CBA, you know, especially with the doctors. You know, they knew there were issues with the nurses. You know. That it has come to this, that it hasn't been resolved before it got to this, before people are dying in hospitals, is itself a failure of governance. You know, that's why it's important for us, once all this is resolved, to go back and look at how it was carried out, insist that people take responsibility. You know, where there were failures, people get punished for those failures. So that the next time we can come up with a plan and a way of addressing things, that does not mean that people die in hospitals as we are pending a resolution.
Okay. Susan, your take on the doctor's strike and how we've covered it so far, and whether it is, like Gadara says, contextualized for everybody to understand that this CBA was signed in June 2013. Here we are now in 2017, and we have both sides taking a very hard stance, with the doctors saying, unless the CBA is implemented, we're not going back to work, with the government saying, look, we're trying, we've called them to the negotiating table, they didn't show up.
First of all, I must say, I think the president should have mentioned or had even a sentence about it during his speech on Jamhuri Day, because what we've been taught by history is that our forefathers, when they went to fight for independence, what really led their determination was the commitment to fight disease, ignorance, and poverty. So then, meaning, like CRISPR would say, the health is a key primary sector. A sick nation has got no future at all. And therefore, whenever we are celebrating a big day like this, where we try to remember the struggles of those, our heroes, and you know what has made us be where we are as a republic, I think, and we have an issue which is going on, like in the health sector. It's wrong for somebody to say that he had spoken about it. I mean, there was nothing wrong for him even to repeat. And even to show the commitment which they show Kenyans. We are kicked off the process. We believe in those people who are negotiating, and that we will soon have a truce. And but I must say, I agree with him that even the media has not contextualized, because health is a fully devolved function. And therefore, I think there is even a problem, because the CBA was signed between which party and which party? The CBA was signed between the Minister of Health, the national government, and these health workers, and yet we know even the personnel. the emoluments and everything was devolved. So that's where the problem begins from. And I think what probably should be coming up, how do we get a new CBA in these negotiations so that now all these things we transfer to the county governments. But we must also recognize the fact that we've had push and pull from the two governments. We've even had situations where the national government is trying to say, return back the health function to us, because us, we can really
like
manage
the county
it.
government has failed.
has failed. So for me, what I think we need to, I agree with him, we need just not to look at these issues with their face value, but we need to dig. Somebody somewhere could just be doing things just to paint the other level of government that you are unable, and yet we know very well we've had success stories in the health sector. Right now, if we went to the individual down there, the Mwananchi, will be able to tell you very good successful stories that has happened, and especially pointing at the health sector when it comes to devolution. So for me, I think, again, it was a big disappointment. Then, what were we discussing on Jamhuri Day as a nation? Maybe we need to start interrogating what do we have to do, what commitments do we need to be reading from the president, or do we need the, like I said, the headmaster of this country to be telling us?
All right. David Ohito, obviously, as a media, we are the watchdog, and sometimes it is upon us to ask the right questions and put pressure where we can put pressure for things to change. And of course, with the doctor's strike, do you think we've done all that we can, first of all, to paint the real picture, why this CBA is not signed, why it's taking so long, why there is a delay, yet Kenyans are dying?
Yes, I think we've tried to do that pretty much, and reminded Kenyans of how the health services have been devolved. We've carried stories of success, stories, places like Mandera, where there are no functional dispensaries. You have functional health centers. The mothers can deliver now without walking 100 kilometers plus in the nearest dispensaries. But these services have now been crippled because people cannot get services, because labor has been withdrawn. Yes, it's a very difficult situation for the poor people, especially those seeking public health services. But to try and fault media, we simply a watchdog, and we report what happens, interrogate what happens. When they fail to negotiate, there's very little we can do. We've been waiting for that white smoke to come out so that Kenyans can enjoy their country and also go to Christmas in fair health status. So this much, I think we've tried our best.
We've done our best.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to something else. And this was the WIPA conference yesterday. And maybe I'll start with you, Gadara, in terms of, I've looked at most of the dailies this morning in regards to that particular conference. And we're alluding to the fact that there's momentum being gathered. It looks like, there is a lot of snowballing in NASA. NASA is gaining momentum. And maybe starting from the fact that what advises us that there is momentum? Is it because initially it looked like Mudavadi was talking about NASA on his own? Now it looks like the idea has sold to the other principals. Do you think that we are being genuine when we say there's actually momentum gathering?
Well, it depends again on how you define momentum and what it is. If you're talking that there's momentum in the sense that these people seem to be coming together, I think that is true. I think that there's a sense in which the rumored, if you will, associations and getting together is becoming more and more real. So it was, I think, for me, quite surprising to see Raila turn up there and with Kalonzo and Mudavadi and the representatives apparently from Wetangula. So it looks like it is becoming a more solid platform from where they will be. But I think for me, the media should be more interested in what their proposals and policies would be. In what sense would they be different from Jubilee? And on that note, I find it quite disappointing, to be quite honest.
Let me just hold that thought. Let me take a call from Rogo in Kibera. And good morning, Rogo from Kibera. Thank you for calling. To your comment.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Well, thank you.
I would like to take my contribution here.
Go right ahead.
I'm Daniel Orogo from Kibera. I chair Langata Youth Network. But as a young leader, I'm worried exactly what is going on. I think in the first instance, the two coalitions from their campaign agenda, there is no mention of Kenyans at interest. There is none. I think every issue about this country is being politicized. Its health crisis is being politicized. And I think with not much saying is, let me talk about the utterances by the head of state on Jamhuri Day. We all know that the work of NGOs is to implement the kind of work the government is doing, and there is no doubt about that. And I think for some times in this country, we are not admitting that when the non-governmental organizations are assisting us, for example, to eradicate poverty and to do programs that are uplifting human standards in this Kenya, the president celebrates and everybody enjoys, and the ministers. But when it comes to empowering the citizens, people raise eyebrows and say, the money cannot come to this country. And I say this. And as long as we are having a number of spoiled votes that cannot be counted for, the Kenyans need civic education as much as that is concerned. And so I think as a young person, I'm worried about the future of this country, because all the coalitions are rallying behind tribes. Call it NASA is a coalition of tribes. Jubilee is a coalition of tribes. And I think it's the right time for us as young people in this country to decide exactly the fate of this country, because it is doom. I see a spell of political doom. And corruption is, I don't know how we'll tackle corruption in this country. Only the media in the coverage of health crisis. I think it's very, for me, it was fair. It was fair. And I hear one of the panelists saying that it was something that was taken out of proportion. For the Kenyan, I think it is important to give highlights to what is happening. If people are not agreeing on CBA, then media should tell us why they are not agreeing and who is a problem in the argument. So I think for me, that is all my contribution this morning. Let us be very responsive about what we cover and cover it. For me, that was a nice coverage. And when the media is not doing their work, right now, you should tell us who is a problem in terms of causing chaos, who is predicting doom in this country, who is spewing hate. And I think just tell us for Kenyans to know.
All right. We'll also take a call from Johnson in Kitale. Good morning, Johnson. Thank you for calling. To your comment or question.
Hello.
Good morning.
I have two comments which I want to comment.
Go right ahead.
One is about the foreigner NGOs. Second one is about the Wiper endorsing Kalonzo. That's what I can talk about it.
Go ahead.
The first one, those NGOs, why are they coming late this time to educate Kenyans about voting? That's just the point. They should explain to us and to understand exactly what they're after. The second one about Wiper endorsing Kalonzo. There's nothing there new. It's normal. It's the same what happened to Wetangula when he was lodging in Bungakameka. It's very different. Hizi zile ni umba mwitu zile tu za kawaida wanabadilisha uniform. Na hawa hata tukiwapei serikali bado sio watakuja kuiba tu kama vile Jubilee inafanya. There's no different ambao wanaweza kutuambia.
Thank you very much. And let me to the panel now. And Susan, a number of issues coming out there. But let's first of all, his last comment in regards to Wiper endorsing Kalonzo, and maybe to protract because of time, that conversation. As the media, what is NASA bringing on the table? Apart from just them coming together and becoming a bigger group in terms of numbers, in terms of a plan, ideologies, what is it that NASA brings onto the table? Have we interrogated that?
The media hasn't interrogated that, because what the media keeps on telling us, Ford Kenya has endorsed Wetangula, now Wiper has endorsed Kalonzo.
ODM has endorsed
now ODM
Raila.
Has endorsed Raila. ANC has endorsed who? Musalia. And to me, 7 months to the election, and we are still endorsing individuals. If I were the media, I would want really to interrogate, because coalition building is not as easy as people think. So we need to know, even as they coalesce, because it's the role of the media also to kind of educate Kenyans, you know, who will be the supporters, the potential supporters of this coalition. I mean, what are the nitty-gritties? What are the details? Because if we're still having individuals, you know, thumping their chest and say, I'm the best. Kalonzo said he's the best. Raila said he's the best. Everybody is the best. And, you know, for them not reach a level and say one of us is the best, it may not work. And I agree with them, even the first caller, who said as young people, they don't think there is anything for them. We haven't really seen issues that are coming up, even so that Kenyans can be able to compare what is it that the opposition has in their basket compared to what is already there that the government has. So I think we leave Kenyans with very few points in terms of trying to compare the two coalitions, and it is sad because Kenyans again will go to vote on tribal basis, on a personality basis. I would have wished that NASA or whichever, they can still give it a different name, should have been built, aimed at building an institution where we can be able to see issues. Right now we are having doctor strike and they're having an opposition coalition. Someone, I'm the best. You know, there is a problem. The media needs to tell us. And you know what, media, you don't need to carry each and every news. I mean, you don't need.
Okay, give them a media blackout. Yankem, do you think that moving forward, because of time, what is it that you'd like to see us interrogate in regards to especially the political scenario that we have now? Somebody did mention, I think the first caller, that everything in Kenya seems to be politicized. Even the nurses' strike has become a political issue.
That is our major problem, and I think I couldn't agree more with the two callers. They've actually hit the nail on the head and told us exactly where the problem is. But let me say this, the formation of NASA is a welcome idea, because as a country moving forward, we need serious coalitions that speak to the issues that afflict the common person. As to whether these two coalitions
are they speaking to the
they haven't, particularly NASA, because like Susan and the two callers have put it, what we've seen are actually endorsements. But let me quickly touch on the speech by the Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka yesterday. Looking at his entire speech, because I actually had an opportunity to review it, a lot of it was actually flowery language and promises. But like any other person or any other leader who's gunning for a serious position like the presidency, I think it was off the mark. He actually needed to do better other than telling us where he's come from, with due respect to him, because looking at his track record, the fellas who come from Sekuru tell us that he hasn't achieved much despite being part of the government in the last 30 years. But let me say this, that it is up to Kenyans, and allow me to quote one of the greatest Greek philosophers by the name Plato, who was actually a student of Socrates and a teacher of Aristotle. He said that the heaviest penalties in life is for you to refuse to participate in politics, because you'll end up being governed by the inferior. It is up to Kenyans, when the elections are approaching, it is up to them to ensure that they are not being governed by inferior governors, they are not being governed by inferior senators, they are not being governed by inferior members of parliament and MCAs, because the tragedy of this country is what we are seeing right now. We cannot afford 5 more years of MCAs squandering money and taking tea somewhere that run into millions of shillings.
It's not just
MCAs. It is up to them. I've said it is not up to MCAs.
All right.
I've said, but as we approach the elections, I think it is incumbent upon Kenyans to ensure they register in large numbers and ensure that they vote in credible people as 2017.
Yes, and we are winding up. We have very few minutes, so keep it brief.
I think when people speak about the politicization of these things, the fact is they should be politicized. The nurses' strike should be the subject of politics. It's just that our understanding of politics is that politics is about solving the problems of politicians, not solving our own problems. But our politicians need to discuss who will run, and we get sort of caught up into this, and our media sort of starts reporting that as that's what's important, not why he will run, not what he's running for, not what his proposals are to actually solve problems. And I think that for us, we need to go back to the drawing board, I mean, as media, about how we report these sorts of things. I think there should be real questioning when they stood up as they did yesterday and speak about withdrawing from the ICC, etc. And don't mention that you've got a president in power who is subverting the very constitution he swore to protect. And they don't speak about that. That nobody in the media then interrogates Kalonzo Musyoka's stand on the ICC, given his shuttle diplomacy, remember, in the dying days of the Kibaki regime, when he was going all over the place saying how these cases should be postponed, etc. We need to interrogate them on their stance.
Exactly.
Raila stands up, says, well, he should have been locked up. Well, wasn't he the one arguing that he should have been there in the first place? A few months ago. We shouldn't let them get away with this. It's not about their problems.
It's about our problems.
It's not their problems, about ours. And that's why we should be insisting that even when they come together as a coalition and start saying, oh, I'm the best or whatever, on what basis? Where is the policy? What are you going to do about the nurses? What are you going to do about education? What are you going to do about security? Give us specifics, and then on the basis of that, we can judge who is the best
man to beat. All right.
And I think for the media, just a quick one.
You had your time, man.
allow Hito, in case the director tells me we're out of time, let me just hear from him. I'll give you a chance if time allows.
For the first time, I'm seeing Jubilee scared and cornered. President in his language and mien, he was expressing fear because they expected a disunited opposition. When you see opposition uniting 7 months to an election, wherever you are in power, you must be a very worried person. And with the wind of change blowing across the world, from Brexit to France, Sarkozy going home,
to US.
US elections, Gambia, Ghana, what does that tell you? That you must do your homework properly. And for me, I would encourage the opposition, NASA, whatever it is, that as long as they can unite to resolve, take this country to the next level, resolve to fight corruption, should they be elected to power, ensure a peaceful election, so be it. Because I think Kenyans are saying we've had enough. We've heard what the callers were saying, that this is the time.
Okay.
And so for Kalonzo Musyoka and his team, wish them the best.
All the
if
best.
only they can do a better job than Jubilee.
Okay.
The question is whether
I think time is out. That music means our time is up. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of the panel this morning in the newsroom. And remember, the question we had asked earlier on is whether NASA has the right structure to form the next government. And your comments have come through. Michael, I'm not sure there is any structure that I know of that NASA have. That's an answer from Mary. We also have Solomon, who says, yes, they do, if only they maintain the promises that they have made, then they have the right structure. And just to give you the poll results so far, we have 67% of you saying yes, they have the right structure, 33% say no, and well, that's the poll tally. We'll read through it also as we go along, but this is where now we'll have to wind up Newsroom. For those of us on KTN Home, today's Wednesday Life and Style is just about to begin, and for those of us on KTN News, we've got some news updates. Later on, we'll be looking at your health, so do stay with us right here on KTN News.